Welcome back. So, on the last episode, we talked about the birth rate crisis and how it's impacting society at large, and it's getting a little bit out of hand on with many countries around the world. And that was by Sean Ryan from his clip channel at Sean Ryan Clips. Phenomenal video and phenomenal channel. Give him a follow. Today, we're going to react to another video by the same podcast discussion that he had. In this one, we're going to discuss, they're going to go into how the family has been kind of systematically broken by governmental forces and so forth. So let's take a look.
The first thing that an authoritarian regime does when it wants to take over a society is it ruthlessly destroys the family.
You think every man should have to serve the country?
You have an entire generation of young people who are no longer resilient. In 1973, there were two things that radically changed how Americans view themselves, how men and women view themselves. I see kind of all of history as a war between the family and the state.
What do you mean by that? The attack on the American family?
Yeah, no, it's I wrote a speech that I gave a couple months ago where I really started talking about how I see kind of all of history as a war between the family and the state. These two big institutions. One is, and it goes back to Plato. It goes back to like the Republic, the Greeks, right, where the entire philosophy of the Republic is that perhaps the state can take better care of a society than these institutional families. And so when you look at you go back through history and you see that especially authoritarian regimes, the first thing that an authoritarian regime does when it wants to take over a society is it ruthlessly destroys the family. So you mentioned the one-child policy in China. That was an attack, a deliberate attack on the family from an authoritarian regime. And the purpose of it was, it was for national interest. They talk about, we couldn't, we wouldn't be able to supply enough people with food. But what it really was to weaken the only institution that can ever combat the state.
And that one child policy has really backfired on China. Just on the last episode, we talked how that's affecting China's depopulation and that they can't even pair up future Chinese men and women or for future family purposes now. There's kind of an way too many number of males versus females, so there's not a good number of both to having a thriving future in society. But yeah, 100% true. And if it goes back to, there's some post about if the devil were to corrupt society, what would he do if you ask ChatGPT or AI? And one of the things they mention is to break up the family. And it's true, right? If you break up the family institution, right, and it's all a bunch of individuals everywhere, like you don't have a united, you don't have a united nation, and you certainly don't have a united family, right? So it's actually easier to control, unfortunately, from a governmental standpoint. Now, I pray that's not necessarily 100% the case in America. Like I pray we're not going to actually that direction. But I mean, like she's saying, if that was your ultimate goal, right, from a governmental standpoint, it does make sense to break up the family. Easier to control. Everyone's divided. Let's continue.
Which is the family. And so I'm a pretty conspiratorial person. I think there's been a concerted attack on the family to strengthen the state, particularly for the last 50 years. But it's been done in very specific ways, in legal ways, through the education system, through the medical system, and it is deliberately destroyed. And you see it through the birth rate, like we talked about in the beginning. Fewer and fewer people want to have families, and it's because of this deliberate attack on the family. And I wrote this piece called "The War on Suffering," where I've been very vocal about the fact that I think everything in America changed in 1973. Everyone always there's this website called WTF happened in 1971.
Just a side note, that's way before my time. I'm the last of the 80s in 89, right? So that's a whole nother era before me, but apparently a very impactful time in history.
And it points to that's when we came off the gold standard. That's when regulation started exploding in America. What happened in this year where everything bad in America started like from this moment where you just see just complete change in a lot of things around America. And I've always said that that might have been the economic change that happened in America, where financialization started and where, housing became so expensive, where it became ridiculously expensive to afford healthcare or education. But in 1973, there were two things that radically changed how Americans view themselves, how men and women view themselves, and ultimately what I think is sort of the impetus and start of this sort of unraveling of the family. And I've said this a lot publicly on what I think changed for men, which was 1973 in January. Nixon did the most profound and most popular thing that he ever did during his presidency, which was that he ended the draft. It was unanimous. It was coming off of Vietnam. It was like a unanimous thing that everyone loved. Everyone knew what needed to happen. Where he said we're going to be an all volunteer force, and we're going to allow people to choose to serve their country.
Man, if you look at Gen Z, holy shit, do we need something like that back? My God. I mean, no offense to anyone, but my goodness, especially when you have siblings or family members in the generation, there's a huge difference. When you're not faced with actual global threats or, if you don't have a purpose in life or you don't have a mission and everything is the world's fault, you're not accountable for anything and it's just all trauma. Like, this is a result of that, right? Now, there was no draft at my era as well, and it was volunteering, right? Everyone who wanted to go in the armed forces, they voluntarily went, and hopefully they got benefited, right, through packages and so forth. Um, but honestly, yeah, I feel like you have a better society when it's like mandatory, right? You produce better outcomes. You produce purpose filled and purpose driven society and people, right? When you're fighting for something bigger than yourself. Because as we talked about, this society is more individualistic and focused on oneself more than society at large. And yeah, at the end of the day, you are only pretty much responsible for yourself and your loved ones, yes. But when too many people are too individually focused, it takes the emphasis off the bigger picture. You're going to see societies crumbling and having troubles on a bigger scale.
And of course, this is something that even today, people, our military celebrates the fact that we don't have a draft, that, this is part of American culture. But I think what it fundamentally said to young people is that it is a choice to serve. It is a choice. Not everyone does it. Only the people who want to. They might want to do it for economic reasons. They might want to do it for love of country. But it is not something that everyone has to do to serve and defend their country. And if you think about it, throughout human history, that is the first time that a country has said to young men, your purpose on this earth is not to defend where you live. And it was codified. It was like, that is not the purpose of manhood.
World War II, World War One, Vietnam War, Korean War, Civil War, if you want to go all the way back to the beginning of the country. Yeah, most adult men were like, we have a purpose to defend the nation, barring none. Okay. And like, you have to be completely decapacitated or have a really valid reason for not having to defend the nation. Okay. So, yeah, that is true. That being said, I am thankful that I didn't have to be forced to necessarily serve. However, do I think it's better for society at large? Yeah, I do think it's better. And if my future child is called to action for my future son, I should say, called to action for a future potential conflict that affects all of us, would I want him or her to be involved? I would say yes, for the greater good, if they're also willing to. Not like 100% against their will, if they're just vehemently against it. Okay? I would like them to want to. But do I believe it's serving the greater purpose for a greater good for the world? If yes, then I believe they should. And these younger generations are a result of never having to deal with actual life experiences. And I would say our millennial generation has gone through as much as a generation can go through without being directly involved in a major war. We talk about that a lot here. I won't dive into as much, but let's continue.
And then 10 days later, and it was only in 2023 when I was writing this piece that I actually even realized this. 10 days later, the female equivalent happened, where Roe v. Wade passed from the Supreme Court. And that had a similar impact on women, where it used to be for all of human history, your purpose on this earth is to have children, is to have a family. And this was the first time, and in Western, Western society too, a lot of nations copied us after it, but this was the moment that really changed, where 10 days after men were told your purpose is not to serve, women were told your purpose is not to have a family, it's your choice. And
Wow.
so it completely changes the view of how men view themselves and how women view themselves, all in 1973, January, 10 days. And it's like, I would say there's a lot of people who would say, well, these are all good things. It's really good that there's choice in America. Not everyone should have.
That's crazy that those two particular things, major governmental choices and by therefore societal updates, happen in the same year within a few days of itself. That's pretty nuts. But yeah, man, I mean, just in the last episode, like we talked about the birth rate crisis, the previous generations from baby boomers and previous to that, right? All throughout history, there was no qualms about it that purpose in life for especially for females is to be mothers, is to bear children and have them grow, okay? Yes, that has always been a purpose for I would say both male and female, but certainly on the female side. Okay, because females didn't fight in wars throughout history until recently. Okay, it's just a fact, and and yeah, like there was not even a question in their mind. My parents' generation, anyone's baby boomers, parents, or even maybe Gen X. I'm not all that certain about them. I heard they're a bit underrated or under discussed or something. But yes, from World War One, World War Two, Depression era, whatever. There is no qualms in those people's minds that if after they reach adulthood, the goal was building a family. Okay, was supporting your family, was providing, protecting, and defending the nation. Right. I'm pretty sure a lot historians and most folks can agree that was the norm, right? And then, like she said, 1971, you happen to pass a couple of bills. One says draft is no longer mandatory; it's optional. You have a choice to go serve the country or not, unless it's like a declaration of war or something militia thing. And then number two is Roe v. Wade, um, and I'm not as knowledgeable about that topic as for sure she is or many people are. But I mean, yeah, if you take away the purpose from a gender standpoint, male and female, that has historically been the case with two bills. Welcome to modern era.
Have to serve their country. Like not everyone, men and women shouldn't have to go to war, or women shouldn't have to become mothers. But what we didn't do in that moment is we didn't provide anyone an alternative purpose. We didn't provide men and women anything that says actually the purpose of manhood is this, or actually the purpose of womanhood is this. We just said go figure it out yourself. Actually, maybe there is no purpose.
I cannot emphasize this enough that this makes sense when you're in your 30s plus more. But I'm really grateful to have been connected to people who had purpose in their life in my 20s. Very important because for a while I did not. And I just wanted to just live for the moment, have fun, and repeat or whatever, right? But then later you're like, I'm missing out a lot on life by not finding purpose and working towards something more fulfilling. Anyway, cannot emphasize enough the importance of having a purpose in your life. Okay. And it can be simply having a family, it can be simply having children, it can be working a high quality job, and providing for those and taking care of your parents, supporting your community. It can be any of those things, yes. But having no purpose in life is like the most guaranteed way that you're not going to go anywhere. I mean, it's hard to go anywhere if you don't have a direction. Does that make sense? Your Google Maps ain't working without a route, my friend. It's not working without a destination. Okay? If you don't have a destination, you can't have a route. You can't get to where you're gonna go. And purpose is kind of a vehicle. It's kind of a direction to where you want to go. right? Ultimately.
In the 70s, like there was this very clear, kind of, I would say almost like nihilistic culture of, well, nothing really matters anymore. Like you can do whatever you want. And like that I think has permeated, so much of society where we don't even believe suffering should exist anymore. It's like the
Mhm.
suffering for your country is why would anyone do that? Suffering for your family, why would you do that? But I think the minute that we destroyed, the unique purpose of woman, which for, you can't debate that for millennial, that was the purpose of women was to bear children and to have family. And then the unique purpose of man, which is to fight. The minute that we destroyed those purposes, men and women stopped relating to each other.
For millennia, did you hear that? 4,000 plus years. Overall, on a bigger scale, female purpose, have and bear children. Male purpose, protect, provide, fight in wars. This has been history. Don't come at me. Go look at history, okay? And she's only quoting from what has been historically documented for this period of time. And by the way, history is way before we can even record it, right? And so yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, we can't relate to each other, and modern dating, anyone who's my age or single or anything, or even divorced or whatever, anyone that's even uh, in the dating market at all can relate. It's the most insane thing ever, and no one's happy, and no one's satisfied, and just continue going and looking, and nobody can relate to each other. And the smallest, tiniest reason you find someone you're not interested in, or don't want to text back, is just swipe left. You know. Anyway, not gonna dive too much into that as much, but yeah, when you look at it from a societal scale, that's a huge change from past 1,000 years.
They didn't know who they were. They didn't know what their purpose was. They didn't know how they could relate.
Mm.
And when you look at it from that framework, the family was destined to fail from that moment.
Damn. You think every man should have to serve the country?
No. That I think is the I don't know that every man needs to go to war, right? But I think there is something that happens when you say, we once were a country where everyone was treated this way. Everyone knew their purpose. Everyone woke up in the morning and knew at 18, there is a chance I will have to serve my country. And that, just understanding that that is your purpose, change.
In fact, in high school, I remember a debate or something about if you're should the drinking age be 18, because if you're old enough to go into war and fight for the country and potentially die, are you old enough to drink? I mean, I'm glad they didn't lower it. They should be 21, and should be older if you ask me. But there is no mandatory draft. There hasn't been, right, from this time until now. So it is an option to fight and serve. You don't have to at this time. And so, yeah, that is a difference of a mindset, okay, overall. And but before 71, you essentially had to be part of some kind of a services and such. There are other countries that require mandatory services, selective services or whatever. um I need to look into this, but I believe there was some kind of like, there's Peace Corps and there's selective service of that kind, voluntary, reserves, whatever. So there's a lot of options, not just straight up in the army. But yeah, I remember there are other countries that do make their population at a certain age, adulthood, especially males, go through that. I think you kind of have a better society if you do so.
Changes the way you walk. It changes the way that you think about your life. Um, and the same thing for, I don't think every woman should have to be a mother. If I talk to, 9 people or 10 people, 9 out of 10 people would say, of course, like these are good things, right? These are popular things.
Hmm.
But at the same time, when we didn't replace that purpose with something else, and we didn't have a way of saying this is how society should be organized.
You're saying that it changed the consciousness of the
It
country.
it yes. And the thing that we did instead was, instead of, serving your country is an outward focused thing. It's focused on other people. It's focused on someone other than you. The same thing with being a mother. The minute you become a mother, you stop worrying about yourself, right? Like you don't have time to make yourself the most important thing. Like you have to worry about your children. So in both of those cases, those purposes, they were outwardly focused. They were things where this is how we organize society, and you care about the institution of family, and the men care about the institution of their country. But what we did instead was we turned inward. We started focusing on our own mind. And this is like the moment that we really start thinking about, psychology, like who am I? What is my purpose on this earth?
Back to the individualistic mindset of the West, and especially in America. And I can attest, um, I I am guilty of being very individualistic in my 20s. I would say the past decade, way more, and probably before then too. But now I do really see the value of togetherness, family, purpose, all those things. And if that takes someone longer than others, so be it. It's certainly better than never, ever getting to that point.
There's a great book by Philip Reith that was written in the 60s, actually, called The Triumph of the Therapeutic, which is that, man really started turning inward in the 60s and early 70s and really thinking about, like, do I have purpose on this earth, and what is this? And the minute that you stop focusing outward and you become very contemplative, which is really what American culture has become, you become very individualistic, become very obsessed with yourself. Our generation is, the trophy generation, the me generation of like everything, everything about me is interesting, and I'm an individual and I can achieve anything I want. There's no barriers, there's no limitations. But it completely rips out all of the sort of underpinnings of what makes a society function. And I think in some ways that those were sort of the moments where it's like then you saw the unraveling of, well, there shouldn't be any kind of suffering. Like, it's around the same time that no fault divorce happened, around the same time that, like you shouldn't be told who you are, you shouldn't be judged. Similarly in the medical arena, this is around the time where ADHD sort of, the late 80s, SSRIs started really coming about, where it's like we
Oh my God, the mental health crisis. I don't even want to begin that one. Future episode, probably get into more detail, probably get some experts on here. But holy shit, if that's not the biggest actual health crisis that we face as a country, I don't know what is. Yes, obesity is there, right? The vaccine situation, the COVID, whatever else. But that's like a physical thing. Mental health, that's a whole different thing, and that wasn't even really highly studied upon or even understood from the until 30 years ago, from the beginning. So that wasn't even considered real medicine, but now we know that's real. And I don't want to get into it. We know devices, etc., ADHD, SSRIs, we all know all that stuff is connected. Okay, it's connected somehow. And if you even look into it a little bit, I'm sure you can see it in your life or the lives of others, for sure. So hope that gets better.
have to start medicating us because we're thinking too much about ourselves and we have too much depression. And of course, depression, the SSRIs, I think, we're seen as kind of a niche thing. And now they're, what is the number of Americans that are on them? The sort of focus on the move to focus on the self was a very deliberate action. And I think that the crisis of the family comes from the fact that if you're focused on yourself, you really can't be focused on a family. And you hear this all the time from young people. It's like, I haven't achieved what I wanted. I can barely take care of myself at mid-20s. I don't know who I am. How am I going to be able to take care of a kid? And we've forgotten that, like, previous generations, they didn't have that luxury. They didn't have the extended adolescence where they could, say, oh, well, I don't know myself. Like, how am I going to go to war if I don't know myself?
Holy shit, that is such a good point. My God, I could not even eloquently put that better myself. Yeah, that is so true. From high school, college, it was all about finding yourself. Who am I? What do I want to pursue in life? What fulfills me, etc. What makes you happy, etc. In terms of success and what have you. And I agree. Yeah, there was not even a thought to family bearing in your early 20s for sure, or maybe not even mid 20s for the vast majority of us. I didn't realize it stems so deep from like a governmental standpoint, from what she's talking about, these couple of bills here in the 70s. But yeah, she is 100% right. And I agree that our generation definitely did not even prioritize family building from the beginning of adulthood, and I should say from college and beyond, until way after your many years in your 20s gone. And I'm gonna be honest, most of us did partying, including me. Okay, most of us partying, most of us going out to clubs, most of us going to concerts. Most of us going to the bars. Okay, find yourself, yes, and that is a luxury, yes, that previous generations didn't have to deal with, aka boomers and so forth. But yeah, that times have changed, and there's no world wars at the time, and so yeah, I could not agree more with that, and it does blow my mind. I never considered that the whole society could think at the same time based on kind of actions from previous generations and how that trickled down later. Wow.
The greatest generation wasn't able to say that.
Mm-hmm.
They just had to do it. And in some ways, it's like, we can definitely make the argument that things are better now. And in many ways, like, people, are living longer. Like they're, you can definitely make the argument that these things were not necessarily good for society, but at least there was a societal purpose and organization. And I think the thing that has really been corrupted over the last 50 years is that we do not know what our American purpose is. We just, and particularly as it comes to the family, it's
Make money, enjoy your life, be free. If you had to sum it up, isn't that what it is? I mean, let's be real.
family has become an option. It's no longer the default institution that you build your life in.
Yeah.
And without that default institution you build your life in, people just, they flail. You have the loneliness epidemic. You have young women and men who
Depression.
Exactly.
For any men out there that are wondering what your purpose is, it's to provide for your fucking family and protect them. That's it.
No.
But I didn't.
For sure. You do have to provide for your family as a man. It's a masculine realm. And I know that there's a counterculture that's saying otherwise. But, I mean, your parents are getting older, right? And especially if you're the firstborn child like I am, like they rely on you now. And it's kind of your duty to take care of them. Yes. Is there a lot of trauma there? Is there drama there? Is there a lot of history there? Yes. But does that change the fact that that's your family or that's your parents? No, right? And like they're the ones who helped raise you, and mine raised me. And so the very least you can do is take care of them. Now they're talking about future family, like your own family, right? So yeah, that requires two people coming together and with the same values, same mission, same similar mindset, and willing to take the plunge, right? So that goes back to kind of our dating world and this insane relationship world and tech-driven society we live in today, right? So that's completely flipped on its head. So it makes sense if your mindset, which thank you modern culture and media, etc. If your mindset is just do it for me and worry about it later, now we're seeing the societal impact. This eloquently puts it. She does.
Realize there was that much confusion out there about it, but I mean, but then you look around and where are all the men?
Yeah.
Where did they go?
Yeah. To quote the New York Times.
Yeah. Right. So I mean, I wish I would have known you were a conspiratorial person, because otherwise
Yeah.
we'd be talking about aliens and the
Yes.
pyramids and
Yeah.
Machu Picchu and all kinds of other shit. But
Yeah.
but I mean, so the question is, you had mentioned, those were draft ended pro-choice or Roe v. Wade, 10 days apart. I mean, so is this just the result of shitty decision making? The list goes. I'm not weighing in on those subjects, but what I'm saying is, it sounds like you think that's where it started. Then we see, all the stuff with the gender stuff nowadays, and Washington State, the state will come and take your kid if you don't do the gender affirming care, and there's just a whole number of things. And so, is it stemming from somewhere, or is this just a result of decisions?
I think it's a result of both legal and medical decisions, because I think the medical community has a huge part of this as well. But I think it comes down to the war on suffering has been won. We've defeated suffering, and life is not about suffering. That is what I think our legal system thinks. That's what our medical system thinks. I mean, when you think of the opioid epidemic, what started the opioid epidemic in the 90s? It was the belief in the medical community that suffering from back pain is one of the worst things that can happen, and that there's a magical pill that you can take that's going to get you off of back pain. And then there were pill mills across America handing out opioids because people couldn't deal with suffering. And that was seen as a good thing. Like, don't you want to eradicate suffering? Same thing with ADHD. Young boys, it's like they can't focus in school. Here's a magical pill, and you're not going to suffer anymore. Your family's not going to suffer. Your teacher's not going to suffer. You're going to feel great. And now 23% of boys at 17 years old are on ADHD medication in America. And it's because
That's insane. Yeah, that's highly like overdiagnosed kind of thing. However, it is a problem, yes, in mental health. But anyway, we'll talk about that more later. But yeah, we'll wrap up this video here shortly. I agree. Suffering is part of life, and look, when I was a young idealistic guy who wished the world could just everyone is happy and you're so naive and you want no one to suffer and whatever. Yes, your intentions are good. Yes. No, nobody actually wants people to suffer unless you're just truly evil or wants their loved ones to suffer or anything. However, unfortunately, like we're not the masters of the universe, and we didn't create the universe or the earth or the world or anything, right? You're only responsible for your life, which you weren't even. You have no choice on being born either. No, FYI, none of us do. Not saying it's a bad thing or anything, but suffering is part of life, and I don't believe there's an end to suffering. And because you're also saying, is there an end to pain? And we're mortal creatures, all of us. Every living creature is a mortal creature. What does mortal mean? You are born and you will. Exactly. So, yeah, suffering's part of life, and you can either all great winners, successful people, they all suffered and struggled for sure. The difference is they didn't let it keep them down. Okay, Rocky Balboa, right? Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, etc. Fighters, winners, Tom Brady, Michael Jordan's, etc. They're gonna lose. They're gonna get broken down. They're gonna get knocked out, but they're gonna keep going, right? So now I know that's an extreme example because they're super mega successful sports stars, but you get my point.
we just do not believe that anyone should have to suffer. We don't believe in resilience. We don't believe that anyone should have to make a choice that has something to do with society or something that is duty versus what they want to do. It's all individualistic. And I think, the best example of the war on suffering is what hasn't happened fully in the US, but it's happening in the UK. It already happened in Canada, which is if you now suffer from mental illness, you have the right to die. If you're over 18, you are welcome to go to a doctor who will sign off of it, and you can end your life. And like
Suicide machines.
that, yeah, and that was not the America we lived in before.
Yeah.
Holy shit. I did not know that. That is crazy. Oh my god, for fucking mental health. Yeah, man, this does not make one feel confident in the world that they live in. So as you can see, yet another reason the birth rate crisis is happening, because when you see the world as it is, a lot of people are not really motivated to bring a child into the world based on the state of the world, as she mentioned. So, yeah, okay. PSA: if you're experiencing mental health at all, please seek a therapist. Okay, I've taken therapy. I do meditation, breath work, diet, exercise, sleep, all those things, right? So it is a thing. It's real. Take it seriously. See a therapist. And if I'm gonna plug something, I'll plug BetterHelp. Okay, BetterHelp.com, right, where you can get matched with a therapist based on your individual needs or whatever. So, but I'm not sponsored, FYI. Take your mental health seriously. Male, female, young, old, doesn't matter. It is real. For God's sake, don't do what she's saying that people do, which go to their doctor and get permission to take suicide pills. God, man, I don't know what the hell is the world's coming to if that's even possible.
So the question is, why are we so opposed to suffering? And I get a lot of pushback from people on this. Well, why are you pro suffering? And I'm a practicing Catholic. The entire story of Catholicism is about Jesus suffering for something for something noble, for something good, for us, right? But it is a story of suffering. And the movement to try to pull the story of suffering out of human life, that's removing human nature. That's removing the entire Christian story out of how we live, and saying you are not expected to suffer. Which what happens then? You have an entire generation of young people who are no longer resilient. So I think one of the biggest lies is
I think
this.
it takes drive away too.
Oh, 100%.
Takes personal drive away,
Yeah,
which creates less innovators.
totally. Which is why I do think, like, a lot of these young people, the reason they go to Silicon Valley and they sleep on the factory floor and they work hard and they're building hard things is because they know that suffering is inherently, like, there is something good about suffering for a purpose greater than yourself. But I do think that people are confused about how to find that.
See, she said it perfectly. There is something good about suffering for a purpose greater than yourself. Okay? I worked on entrepreneurial aspects myself, okay? And I had to somewhat suffer in my own way. It's not like actual suffering like I'm a cancer patient, okay? That's real suffering. But like losing your sleep, okay? Staying awake late, right? Driving through the hours of the night, etc. Something like that. We're going to go ahead and end the video. But I hope you like this reaction. If you like, please hit the like button, subscribe for more. I hope you get a lot of value. Okay. And yeah, I really love these clips at Sean Ryan Clips. Check them out. And check out this YouTube channel and this video as well, because there's so much value here. And there's a lot of things we don't even realize is happening in the society, in the world, that is taking place beyond our understanding. So anyway, take care. Hope you like it. And remember, it's just a perspective.